The story begins in a small town that once lived in fear. 45 years ago, people locked their doors early. Parents kept their children inside. Nobody walked alone after sunset. In those days, the town was haunted by a shadow, a serial killer known only as the Night Phantom. He attacked without warning. His victims had nothing in common. Some were young, some old, some were rich, some poor. He chose randomly. He left no clues, no footprints, no fingerprints, no witnesses. Even the police could not understand his pattern. It felt like he could appear and disappear at will, like a ghost. This old case file now lies on a dusty shelf in a police archive room. The folder is stained, the paper's yellow. A new officer touches the top of the file with curiosity, not knowing that the story inside once shook an entire town. Back in the 1970s, people whispered his name in fear. Every night, the sound of police sirens became common. Everyone waited for answers, but the killer was always one step ahead. Officers worked day and night, but each clue led nowhere. Every new victim raised more questions. The media called him the Phantom because no one ever saw him coming. Then, one night, everything suddenly stopped. No more attacks, no more bodies, no more signs. People thought maybe he died, or maybe he moved to another place. Slowly, the town tried to return to normal life. But deep inside, everyone knew the truth. A killer does not simply disappear. For years, the case remained a mystery. Police tried new officers, new techniques, new experts. Nothing worked. Eventually, they gave up hope. The murders became a cold case. The file was pushed into the back corner of the archive room, forgotten by time. But time can hide the truth only for so long. 45 years later, the world has changed. Technology has changed. DNA science is now powerful. A small hair, a tiny drop of blood, anything can reveal the truth. And one afternoon, in a modern lab, a young technician studies the old evidence from the Night Phantom case. She is running tests only as part of an old case review project. She does not expect anything special. These cases rarely show results. But then, something unusual appears on her screen. A partial DNA match. Her heartbeat quickens. She tries again. Same result. This is not normal. This is not random. This is something big. She calls her supervisor. He looks at the screen, confused and shocked. Both scientists stare at the result. This DNA match is connected to someone alive today. Somewhere out there, the Night Phantom is still living, and he has no idea that the police are getting close again. The scene shifts to a peaceful neighborhood. A calm morning, a quiet street, birds chirping. A 70-year-old man steps outside his house holding a cup of tea. His face is kind, his movements slow and simple. The neighbors greet him warmly. Children wave at him. People trust him. He smiles back gently. No one knows they are looking at the same man who once filled this town with fear. For decades, he has lived a normal life. He works in his garden. He plays with his grandchildren. He goes to the local market. To everyone, he is a polite old man, a harmless senior, a friendly neighbor. But inside his mind, memories still exist, dark, silent memories that he never speaks about. Sometimes, late at night, he wakes up suddenly. He feels that the past is catching him. But then he tells himself the same thing every time. It has been 45 years. Nobody remembers. Nobody will ever know. He believes the world has forgotten him. He does not know that a single piece of DNA has already revealed the truth, and the police have just reopened the case. The old man, whose real name was Harold Graves, lived a life that looked calm from the outside. Every morning, he walked to the small bakery near his house and bought the same thing, a cup of black coffee and a butter roll. People in the town liked him. They called him Mr. Graves, and they believed he was a gentle, harmless old man who enjoyed gardening and quiet days. Nobody ever imagined that this simple old man once terrified the entire town. Harold had practiced living like a normal person for 45 years. He had learned how to smile naturally, how to talk softly, and how to behave politely. He helped his neighbors carry groceries. He fixed small things around the community. When children passed by, he waved and wished them good luck in school. His whole life was built on a careful performance, one that kept his dark past hidden. But inside him, the truth never disappeared. Harold often woke up at midnight. Sweat covered his forehead. His hands shook. He heard footsteps in his memory, saw shadows that belonged to his past victims, and felt the tension of the old days. Sometimes he sat quietly on the edge of his bed, breathing slowly, reminding himself that he was safe. He believed the past was buried. He believed no one would ever connect him to the crimes. Still, fear lived somewhere deep inside him. One Sunday morning, something unusual happened. Harold was trimming the bushes outside his home when he heard two neighbors discussing a news story on the radio. Their voices reached him clearly. "They're using new DNA technology for those old cold cases," a woman said. "Yeah, they even solved a case from the 1980s last week," the man replied. Harold's heart skipped a beat. He froze for a second. His hands trembled slightly, though he tried to hide it by bending down as if checking the plants. He kept listening. "They say technology can find people even after decades," the woman added. "Even the smallest trace can reveal the truth now." Harold forced a small smile and continued trimming. "Technology keeps improving," he said in his calm voice, as if nothing bothered him. But inside, his mind was shaking. He walked back into his house and locked the door gently. Then he sat on the couch and stared at the wall. Old memories returned like waves. He remembered how careful he used to be, how he never left anything behind, how he believed he was smarter than everyone. For years, he convinced himself that he was safe. But now, he felt something he had not felt in a long time. Danger. He stood up and went to his bedroom closet. At the back, hidden behind old winter coats, was a small metal trunk. He had not opened it in years. His hands hesitated, but then he slowly lifted the lid. Inside were newspaper clippings from the 1970s, reporting night phantom strikes again. There was an old pocket knife, its blade shining faintly. A few other objects lay inside, small reminders of the life he once lived. Things he kept not out of pride, but out of a strange connection to the past. He touched one of the newspaper articles gently. The headline stared back at him. For a moment, he felt like he was looking at another person's story, not his own. But he knew the truth. He could never fully escape it. Harold closed the trunk and pushed it deep into the closet again. Then he walked to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water. His hands were still shaking. He told himself it was nothing. He told himself the police had no reason to look for him. 45 years, he whispered. Too long. They won't find anything. But those words did not calm him anymore. A small voice inside him kept repeating that time was no longer on his side. He had lived quietly for decades, but the world had changed, and something inside Harold knew that the past was waking up again, far away. The police were already following a trail he never expected them to find, and the peaceful life he built was beginning to crack. The cold case review program was supposed to be simple work. Detectives sent old evidence from forgotten crimes to the modern DNA lab. Most cases brought no results. The samples were too damaged, too old, or too mixed with other materials. But the night phantom case was different. The evidence was old, but still usable, and the lab technician, Emily Carter, was patient and sharp. Emily was new to the department. She liked solving puzzles, and she believed every case deserved a chance. When she opened the old night phantom box, she felt a strange chill. The items inside were small: a torn piece of fabric, a few strands of hair, a dried blood trace on a metal surface. She knew this case had scared the town long before she was born. She ran the samples like she did with every other case. The computer took time to scan and compare each DNA strand. She expected nothing special. But then, the screen flashed, a soft alarm beeped. A message popped up: partial match found. Emily leaned forward. She checked the number again. It wasn't an error. Her fingers shook slightly as she clicked deeper. The system showed that part of the DNA matched someone in the national database, not fully, but enough to show relation. It could mean a family member, a child, a cousin, someone connected to the real killer. She called her supervisor, Dr. Harris. He walked in casually, but when he saw the screen, his face changed completely. "This is serious," he whispered. They ran the test again. Same result. They tested a second sample. Same result. This was the break the police had waited for since the 1970s. The night phantom, the ghost who disappeared for decades, had left behind something he never imagined would betray him, a strand of hair. One tiny strand. And now, police had a direction. The case was reopened quietly. Only the chief and two senior detectives were told. They didn't want panic in the town. They didn't want the suspected killer to hear anything and run. The senior detective, Officer Raymond Blake, spent hours studying the old file. He looked at the map, the victim list, the pattern that never made sense back then. He believed everything had a meaning, even if they couldn't see it at the time. Blake requested a list of men who lived in the area during the killings and were still alive today. The list was long, but the DNA match helped narrow it. The police discovered that the partial DNA matched a young man arrested recently in another city, and when they searched deeper, they found the young man's family records. That family tree pointed straight to one name, Harold Graves. Meanwhile, Harold had no idea that danger was getting closer. He spent his days normally walking the dog, buying groceries, reading the newspaper, but he felt something strange in the air. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was fate. He didn't know why, but he felt the past whispering to him again. One evening, as Harold walked home from the store, a black car parked quietly at the corner. Inside the car, Officer Blake watched him carefully. He didn't approach, he didn't speak. He only observed. Harold stopped to tie his shoe. Blake noticed the old man's steady hands, his calm expression, his gentle walk. Nothing about him looked dangerous. He looked like a typical grandfather enjoying his late years. But Blake also knew that the most dangerous criminals often hid behind the most ordinary faces. The next day, the police reviewed more forensic evidence. The DNA test from the old blood sample finally gave a full match. The result was clear. Beyond doubt, Harold Graves was the night phantom. The detective sat in silence. After 45 years, the truth had returned like a storm. Blake felt a strange mix of relief and tension. This old man had fooled an entire town for decades, but now, the net was tightening. The police prepared their next move, and in his quiet home, Harold sensed something he couldn't explain, a feeling that the world he built was beginning to slip away. Harold Graves lived his quiet life with extreme care. For 45 years, he avoided anything that could raise suspicion. He never talked about the past. He never traveled too far. He never made enemies. He created an image of a harmless old man, and he protected that image the way a soldier protects a shield. But even the strongest shield can crack, and Harold's first crack appeared on an ordinary afternoon. He was sitting in the town park, enjoying the warm air. His grandchildren were playing near the swings. Parents sat on benches, chatting. Everything looked normal. Everything felt safe. Harold relaxed, telling himself that the fears from the other day were only in his mind. But then, a journalist approached him. The man was new in town and was writing an article about unsolved local crimes. He was going around interviewing people, collecting opinions. He didn't know anything about Harold. He walked over with a friendly smile and asked one simple question. "Sir, do you remember the old night phantom murders?" The moment Harold heard the name, his heart tightened. He kept his face still, but something inside him reacted. A tiny twitch, a flicker in his eyes, a short pause. It was less than a second, but the journalist noticed it. Harold forced a small smile. "It was a long time ago," he said calmly. "People don't talk about it much now," but the journalist kept watching him, as if reading him. Harold felt uncomfortable. He excused himself politely and went to sit under a tree, away from the crowd. He tried to breathe slowly, telling himself it was nothing. But the damage was already done. Across the park, Officer Raymond Blake was also watching. He had been observing Harold for days, trying to understand the man behind the DNA match. When the journalist mentioned the night phantom, Blake saw Harold's reaction. It was small, but not small enough, A guilty man always reacts to his own name. Blake wrote down the moment in his notebook. He didn't approach Harold yet. He needed proof, not guesses. But today, something changed. Today, he saw fear inside the old man's eyes. Later that evening, Harold returned home with a heavy mind. The moment he closed the door, he leaned against it and exhaled deeply. He felt cornered. He felt exposed. For the first time in decades, he felt truly unsafe. He slowly walked to his bedroom closet and pulled out the metal trunk again. The smell of old paper filled the air. He sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the items inside, small pieces of a life he thought he had buried. He touched a newspaper clipping. His fingers trembled. The old headline stared back at him like a ghost. Night Phantom claims another victim. He closed his eyes and whispered, "I should have destroyed these years ago." He wasn't the same daring man he once was. Age had softened him. Fear weakened him. Guilt grew stronger every year. He no longer felt like the phantom he once was. He felt like a tired old man carrying a heavy secret. Outside, the street was quiet, but a police car was parked blocks away. Blake and another detective watched Harold's house through binoculars. They noticed the lights turning on and off in different rooms. They saw Harold closing curtains carefully. They wrote down every movement. Harold didn't know how close they were. He only knew that something was slipping. Something he controlled for decades was now breaking apart. The next morning, when Harold stepped outside, he noticed a piece of paper stuck to his mailbox. It was a letter from the forensic department. A fake survey, a harmless-looking envelope. But Harold instantly felt cold fear spreading through his chest. He looked around the street. For the first time, it felt like every window was watching him. Every person was studying him. He walked back inside and closed the door quietly. He held the envelope in his shaking hands. A single mistake, his small reaction in the park, had changed everything. Now he began to understand. The past was no longer sleeping. It was walking straight toward him. Harold Graves sat alone in his living room, staring at the envelope from the forensic department. The soft paper felt heavier than stone. His hands trembled as he turned it over again and again. He did not open it. He didn't need to. He already knew what it meant. For 45 years, he had controlled every detail of his life. But now, this one letter had broken through all his defenses. His heartbeat was slow but painful. His breath came in short waves. He felt like the walls around him were closing in. He placed the envelope on the table and leaned back. His eyes stared at the ceiling. For the first time in decades, he felt the same fear he used to give others, the same fear that made people lock their doors every night. His mind drifted back to the past. He remembered the dark streets, the chilled silence, the feeling of power when the town feared him. But those memories no longer excited him. Now they felt like chains pulling him down. He wasn't the Night Phantom anymore. He was just an old man whose time had finally run out. Harold closed his eyes. He saw faces of people he had hurt. Back then, he told himself he was in control. Now he realized he had never been in control at all. His past had always been stronger than him. It was only waiting for the right moment to return. And now it had returned. Outside, the wind blew softly. A dog barked in the distance. The world looked normal. But Harold felt something different in the air. Something cold. Something final. He walked to the window and moved the curtain just enough to peek outside. A black car was parked near the corner. It had been there yesterday too. He recognized it, Officer Blake's car. He knew police surveillance when he saw it. He used to be the one who avoided it. But now, it followed him like a shadow. Harold stepped back from the window. His chest tightened. He whispered to himself, "They know." He opened the envelope at last. Inside was a simple request, a voluntary DNA survey for community health research. He almost laughed. It was a clever trick, a gentle trap, but he saw through it immediately. He whispered again, this time slower, "They know." He walked into the kitchen and poured himself water. His hands shook so much that the glass nearly slipped. He leaned against the counter, trying to steady himself. Memories flooded him again: police sirens, dark alleys, headlines calling him a ghost. He took a deep breath and opened the metal trunk one more time. He looked at the old objects inside. The knife, the clippings, a few items he should have destroyed long ago. He touched them lightly, almost like saying goodbye. He felt no pride now, no satisfaction, only regret and fear. Then something strange happened. A moment of calm washed over him. The fear didn't vanish, but it changed. It turned into acceptance. After years of pretending, hiding, lying, he finally faced the truth. He had been caught. Not today, not yesterday, but the moment the past found him again. He sat on the edge of his bed. The house was silent. He listened to the ticking of the clock on the wall. Each second felt like a countdown. He thought of his family, his wife, his children, his grandchildren. They knew nothing. They loved him. They trusted him. And soon, they would learn who he really was. The thought hurt him more than any punishment the police could give. He whispered, "I'm sorry," though no one was there to hear it. For years, he believed time protected him. But time had become his enemy. Technology had become his enemy. Fate had become his enemy. Harold stood up and looked at himself in the mirror. His face was tired. His eyes were empty. The man staring back at him was not a monster or a genius. He was just a man who could not escape his past. Outside, the black car's engine started. Harold's heart sank. He knew what it meant. The final moment was coming. The walls were closing in, and there was nowhere left to run. It was still early when Harold Graves woke up the next morning. The sky outside was pale, almost white, as if the world was holding its breath. The house was quiet, too quiet, and Harold felt a strange peace inside him. It was not comfort. It was acceptance, heavy, cold, and final. He walked slowly to the kitchen and made himself a cup of tea. His hands were steady now. Fear had done all it could. There was nothing left for him to resist. He looked around his small home, the photographs on the wall, the soft rug his wife chose, the shelves filled with old memories. Everything looked ordinary. Everything looked innocent. But he knew he did not belong in this peaceful world anymore. He sat on his sofa and listened to the faint ticking of the clock. Each tick felt like footsteps approaching his door. He closed his eyes for a moment and breathed deeply. The past 45 years played in his mind like a long film. His crimes, his lies, his quiet life, his family, his neighbors, his attempts to pretend he was someone else. Pretending was over. A sudden knock echoed through the house. Harold opened his eyes. He didn't jump. He didn't panic. The moment had arrived exactly as he expected it would. Another knock. Firm and sharp. He stood up slowly, as if every movement carried a lifetime of weight. He walked to the front door and stopped. He placed his hand on the doorknob and whispered to himself. They finally came. When he opened the door, Officer Raymond Blake stood on the porch with two other detectives. Their faces were calm but serious. They were not afraid of the old man in front of them. They knew exactly who he was. Double quotes, Mr. Harold Graves. Blake said, "We need to speak with you." Harold didn't ask why. He didn't argue. He didn't pretend. He simply nodded and replied softly, "I know." Blake seemed surprised at the lack of resistance, but he stepped forward and read the words he had practiced carefully. "Sir, you are under arrest for the murders committed by the man known as the Night Phantom." Harold looked down at his hands as they placed the cold metal cuffs around his wrists. His skin was thin, his bones delicate. He looked nothing like the man who once terrorized the town, yet the truth bound him more tightly than the cuffs ever could. As the detectives walked him toward the police car, neighbors opened their doors. People stepped outside. Confused faces stared. Shocked whispers spread through the street like wildfire. "Mr. Graves, that old man. How is that possible?" Children who once waved at him now hid behind their parents. Adults who once trusted him stared in horror. The image Harold built for decades fell apart in a matter of seconds. Every smile he gave, every kindness he showed now looked like a mask. Harold kept his head down. He didn't meet anyone's eyes. He felt the weight of their disbelief pressing against him, but he accepted it. Inside the car, he looked out the window as his quiet street faded behind him. The town he hid in for so long now watched him leave like a dark secret finally revealed. At the police station, the officers collected evidence from his home. They found the metal trunk, the clippings, the knife, silent witnesses that had waited patiently for truth to surface. There was no need for arguments or excuses. The evidence was clear, the DNA results undeniable. During the interrogation, Harold spoke with a tired voice. He didn't lie. He didn't fight. He confessed slowly, explaining parts of his past he had never spoken aloud. His words were not dramatic. They were empty, like someone admitting to a shadow he no longer recognized. "I thought time would save me," he said quietly. But time doesn't save anyone. The trial that followed was quick. The courtroom filled with people who wanted answers, closure, or justice. Harold sat silently, listening to the charges. His own family watched with tears and confusion. They never knew. They could not understand. And Harold had no words that could ease their pain. When the sentence was finally given, Harold simply nodded as he was taken away. The narrator of this long story becomes clear. Justice had not forgotten him. 45 years later, truth had returned. The night phantom had finally been caught.